So Ione, you just asked me an impossible question, and you asked me if I could answer it, and no, not really. But I'll say a couple of things. Now, that was an incredibly rich and wide-ranging set of discussions. I mostly just learned things from you. Thank you. I come away with a really strong sense of the level of motivation and just the sheer amount of creative hard work from a range of different perspectives, different groups, public, private, and in between. Not least Arzantia Lab itself as a kind of meeting point for these groups. So quite extraordinary, really, the richness and wide-ranging character of it. A couple of quick comments which fail to answer the question. Just a couple of things that struck me. Going right back to one of the earlier comments in the roundtables this afternoon around populism. So this has been is it populism or is it polarization? People use different P words to express a similar kind of set of challenges that are seen to democracy in many places. The research that's taking place amongst many of my political science colleagues at the moment talks about affective polarization. That's the buzz term of the moment. So emotional polarization of feelings, not so much of arguments. And this is a tricky one. I'm going to talk about the populist, so-called populist element of that. Well, populist, of course, comes from the same root as popular, and rule by the people, popular rule, is the definition or root definition, arguably, of the very word democracy, if we refer to the etymology. So this is tricky, isn't it? This is tricky. We've got political leaders who appear to be able to establish, with more or less success, some kind of pretty direct rhetorical line of agreement support with at least a segment, in some cases, in some countries, a significant, lasting segment of the voting population or of the population in general. So that's an interesting one and a tricky one from my perspective. Does that mean I'm trying to say all forms of populism are in fact democratic? Absolutely not. I'm very worried about some of them from the angle of undermining democratic institutions. I would stress the institutional side of that. I have a PhD student, Camille Bernard, who I'm pleased to say yesterday submitted his thesis at the University of Warwick. I share him with the Free University of Brussels. And Camille makes the argument, or he's written a thesis on affective polarization, and he says, and I find it a pretty compelling conclusion, that there are ultimately two forms of affective polarization. One, Democrats need to worry about. The other one, maybe not so much. The one maybe not so much is a kind of idea-based or ideological polarization. People feel affectively, they have strong emotions about their positioning on a kind of left-right spectrum, very broadly speaking. That may be troublesome for democracy in some places, in some respects, but is not intrinsically or endemically troubling. The troubling one, the troubling version, he says, is identity-based, affective polarization, where it's not really the position on issues. It's not really even a position on the left-right ideological spectrum. It's dislike of the other group. Dislike personally of the other group, suspecting their identity. So I just wanted to make that comment because polarization and populism have surfaced at times in conversations today and indeed yesterday here. At other times, they kind of run like a slightly disturbing little river underneath a range of conversations, and that's an interesting one. Second, relatively, we talked about random sampling, so here are random comments. A couple of people, Basque Country as a kind of benchmark for democracy, as an exemplar, okay? A kind of a model. So my question back to you, which will be rhetorical because there's no time to answer it. How recently did, or have I misunderstood, how recently has a fairly widely shared notion amongst many of the groups, public, private, and otherwise in the room here today, for example, that the Basque Country is or could be or should be a democratic practice exemplar for other regions, cultures, and provinces. I find it interesting that it is unusual for me to hear that kind of spoken clearly as a headline, as an ambition, maybe an ambition partly revealed or an ambition yet, partly realized rather, an ambition yet to be realized. But it is really interesting and unusual that there seems to be a pretty collective sense that the Basque Country is or could be an exemplar of innovative democratic practice. I don't think that's an anodyne or just regular thing. I think that's an unusual way to see yourselves as people who think, talk about, worry about, and seek to innovate with democracy. What you wish to do with that comment, I don't know, but I think it was quite impressive. I think I had something else. So finally, yes, I'm slightly obsessed by the main values people think attached to democracy, and so often, and I do this as well, we come out and say, well, you know, obviously it's responsiveness or something. Yeah. To me, that's what it is. It comes out of my work. It comes out of my kind of intuitions about, you know, when we unpack democracy, that is what it fundamentally needs to be about. So I started taking a list of the values we heard over the last two roundtables: multi-level governance, accountability, collaboration, public welfare, closeness to power, deliberation, participation, exemplarity, the common good, co-creation, knowledge creation, pluralism, efficiency, fairness, inclusion, representation, and presence. That's a long list. I would love to do the mapping. Who of you is going to do the mapping exercise of what is captured by, implied by, including institutionally, such notions that you yourselves have highlighted? I've just been your recorder of your values and principles. And to what extent can they, must they speak to each other in practical and in idealistic terms? That is my failure to answer your question, and I will leave it there. Thank you.
So I think I want to end on two considerations on communication and emotions, because I feel like I gave you a very abstract talk in a way, you know, 3 models of democracy. And to some degree, I mean, you know, Michael's is also a political theory, so there's a level of abstraction. And then we had more talks that tried to summarize at a very high level the very detailed and practical work that they do. And so I'm left with a sense of abstraction, in fact, that I think the next step, once we've got all these, you know, information principles right, which is a work we need to do, we also need to connect to the emotions and the vividness of what it is to be part of, say, a citizens' assembly. Because for me, having studied them at a very abstract level, then stepping in one and then governing one in France in the past 4 years, the emotional shock of you know, encountering real people with real stories, moving stories, it taught me something about even love of my people, you know, the French people, that I had never felt before. Taught me that love is a value that we totally underestimate in politics, and we should talk more about, because I spend all my time talking about, you know, cognitive diversity and the power of arguments and information. And I think that I wonder whether we shouldn't do more about that visceral connection to what we're trying to bring about through images, through films, through documentaries. There's a lot of things written about all these processes, not that much done about making them visual, communicating about them in that way, using AI maybe to create visualizations, simulations. I'm struck by the fact that we all give very either sort of oral talks with no images, or, you know, I think we can do more. And I think it's part of what you guys perhaps should be doing here in this lab to help the public get it, because I think it's just really such a shock. And in a way, I had the same experience coming here. You know, I was in contact with Ione and Naiara, and then I knew vaguely about the Basque Country and the beauty of it. And then you arrive here, and the shock of it, it's so visceral. I think we need to find a way to communicate the same visceral shock and emotion to people so that they can picture what a different type of democracy looks like. So it's more of a question than an invitation and a conclusion, but that's where I'm at. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Mike and Hélène, for a very difficult challenge. So I feel that what I stay with are, we need to create a space to continue this reflection, connection across different types of knowledge. We need to do a mapping of different types of emotions, also different types of principles and that we have in the Basque Country. We need to do it from our own culture, from who we actually are. And we need to keep connected with both of your work. So I'm sure that we will find ways to keep that connection, to keep that conversation and reaching back and forward. And we take on this challenge of all of us that will be continue to be working in those different initiatives to share back as well how we are progressing that reflection.
Ez modu honean bukatu dugula, orduan bukatu dugu, garaian bukatu dugu. Importantea da eskerrak eman guztioi, ez? Nik uste dut demokraziak ere behar dituela momentu hauek, ez? Zaila da eta estimatzen dugu benetan, ez? Gure egunerokoan momentu hau hartzea entzuteko, askotan agian ezer berririk ez genuen eramango, ideia batekin balimazoazte edo konbentzimendu hori indartuta, ez? Hau dela lanean jarraitzeko modua eta egin behar duguna horrekin pozik geratzen gara.